What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Itachi never died and became Naruto's dark mentor? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. It was a rumor that Itachi was perfect in everything. Yes, he did successfully perform all fire jutsus within a couple of repetitive tries. Yes, his aim was perfect. Yes, he was a genius. Yes, his taijutsu was nearly always flawless. But he was downright terrible in genjutsu before he unlocked his Sharingan. When Makoto discovered that her first son was incapable of distinguishing genjutsus from reality, she had begun private sessions with him every morning. "Mum," Itachi screamed in one of his rare displays of emotion. Makoto looked down at her 5-year-old boy, shouting, "My blood relationship to you in frustration is not going to make you capable of performing at your zenith." Itachi's eyes narrowed. When Makoto was in training mood, she was an Uchiha first, teacher second, and mother third. They had spent the past 3 hours training in genjutsu, and so far his mother had trapped him in 85. He had only noticed 10 and escaped from 3 of them. "When I get the Sharingan," he began bitterly as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand, "I will be better." "What if you don't get the Sharingan? What if something happens to me and I can no longer teach you?" She cocked her head to the side, her eyes returning to their warm dark orbs. "That's not going to happen," it was a definite statement. He couldn't imagine growing up without his mother or the Sharingan. His hearing was not adequately trained, so he did not hear the soft sigh that escaped his pregnant mother's rosy lips. "You know what I think strength is?" his mother asked as she bent down and leaned towards him and smoothed out his hair. It was a sign that training was over. Itachi raised an eyebrow, not wanting to speak in fear that his emotions would roll into his tone, and Uchihas were not supposed to have emotional tones. When you're not good at something and you do not have any predisposition in that field and yet you still train and practice with it. It's the weak people who don't try or only work to improve what they excel at. Those words would forever be embedded in Itachi's mind. When the village was attacked a few months later, he would bear witness to the brutal warfare which would be the key to unlocking his precious Sharingan. Then, he purposefully trained in every single art obsessively because he wanted to excel in all aspects of shinobi so his mother would think he was strong, and later because he wanted to keep peace and stop war from occurring. He wanted his existence to amount to that of an army. Eventually rumors would spread that Itachi was good at everything, yet they'd never know that he just refused to be weak. Present. Sakura, age 13 and a half. The training grounds were open all day, every day, and only those below the rank of Chunin had to register a time slot and be supervised by a ninja of Junin rank. All the rest were welcome and would generally occupy the training ground room number 8 and higher. Sakura wasn't really about breaking rules. She was a good girl who did the right thing, but as she's learned, doing the right thing doesn't get you noticed. Barely a full year into her team, she already felt as though there was no hope in sight, not even a minuscule speck of it lying around. And as she once read in a book by some witty humorist in the West, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is a clear sign of insanity. And Sakura was nothing if not sane, but really, the situation itself was insane. Kakashi had taken interest in developing Sasuke's and Naruto's abilities almost immediately. The reason was obvious. Both were incredibly skilled and talented and had a lot of potential in comparison to her, who could only boast in excelled examination scores. Then half a year ago, 2 of the legendary Sannin returned, one to become Hokage and another to become Naruto's tutor and mentor. Feeling left out and unnoticed, Sakura had gone up to the great Hokage and asked the busty blonde to be her teacher. She thought it would make things better. Sakura genuinely believed if she worked with a Sannin like Jiraiya and someone was skilled as Kakashi, she would then belong on Team 7. That wasn't the case, and the last mission was the last straw. Their previous mission had taken a terrible toll on once perky pink-haired girl, not because of injury or fear, but because of Kakashi's pathetic attempt to comfort her. She had tried to fight alongside Sasuke and Naruto but, unfortunately, became more of a hindrance than a help. It wasn't even that she was incompetent. Naruto kept blocking any opponent from getting close to her, and Sasuke made sure no weapon reached her at 2-meter vicinity of her. She never even had a chance to show that she could handle herself. At the end of the fight, they weren't even injured enough to be healed with medical chakra. Plus the rogue ninjas were barely rank C. The one with the shaggy hair was totally a rank D. She could have at least taken that one on. On their way back to Konoha, while her two male teammates were engrossed in an argument, she told Kakashi that she didn't feel like part of the team. "Sakura, it's a team's responsibility to take care of their own teammates. When will I get to protect my team?" she asked earnestly. He simply ruffled her hair and offered a hidden smile behind his mask. Sakura knew the unspoken words hanging in the air. Medics from Konoha are generally not fighters except for the Hokage. The Hokage was the exception, but Sakura was not, apparently. She still had to prove herself, but how could she do that when she was still being protected as if she was the client? Practice with Tsunade was paying off. Sakura's medical jutsu was improving at top speed and she was getting better at her chakra control for taijutsu. But it wasn't enough in comparison. She still wasn't fast enough. Sasuke's speed was becoming hard to follow to the naked eye and Naruto's endurance allowed him to run and run and run. Sakura just wasn't able to keep up or even catch up. She still couldn't sense chakra presences well enough while Sasuke felt something from a mile away and Naruto always smelled someone even if they masked their chakra perfectly. She still didn't notice every detail in her surroundings. Sasuke could recall the number of leaves on any damn tree in the forest. She didn't have enough chakra. Naruto had an unlimited supply that seemed never-ending. She still couldn't throw her kunai or shurikens with perfect precisions. Sasuke and Naruto almost never missed. She was still weak while Sasuke and Naruto were strong and were becoming stronger and stronger. She wanted to be on par with them, or at least for them to look at her as a teammate and not something that needed constant protecting. The girl felt as though she had stigmatized herself during her first few months with her Sasuke obsession. After a personal confrontation with reality, she labeled herself as love-struck, blind, and just plain dumb, but when she had finally figuratively looked in the mirror, it was too late. Naruto still saw her as love-obsessed and delicate. Sasuke still saw her as annoying and weak, and worst of all, Kakashi didn't seem to even see her. She didn't feel a part of the team anymore. Sasuke and Naruto had developed a competitive bond that could only house them. Three was a crowd, and Sakura was feeling more and more like the unwanted third. They were still a team in the physical sense, but when in a fight, Sasuke wouldn't trust Sakura to watch his back and Naruto would make sure Sakura was always in line of sight. At first it was cute, back when she was 12 and didn't understand what being a ninja was about. But after Kakashi had killed a ninja right before their eyes, it changed her. She went home and cried because all she could think about is what if that ninja had a family, and friends, and then she thought about Sasuke dying and Naruto dying and Kakashi dying, and couldn't bear it. She wanted to help keep them alive. She wanted to be a strong asset because she had learned how precious life was. That was exactly the reason why the night after they returned from their last mission, she bid farewell to her team and went home. Only to change into one of the last momentums she had of her dad, his Taichi uniform. Her mother used to tell Sakura bedtime stories of her father and his great skill in the underappreciated martial arts and how he was the best in the whole world. She would sometimes put on his uniform. It still didn't fit right and the once bright blue had been dulled with age and misuse, but it always managed to calm her down. She wasn't able to recall exactly what she was thinking when she left her apartment. She just knew that nothing was getting better and sometimes, to excel you needed to break a rule, or two. Tsunade helped her medical jutsu but that still left her on the back lines. It wasn't good enough and she didn't know where else to turn. Kari had her own team and Guy was fully devoted to his. Kakashi practiced with Sasuke and Jiraiya took Naruto under his wing. Tsunade was Hokage, and Konoha came before a weak little pink-haired girl. Sakura exhaled a fog of heat as she saw the outline of the wooden fence. She looked over both shoulders twice as she approached it coyly. She didn't see anyone, but she didn't trust herself enough to take it as fact. There was a sign-up sheet nailed to the large pole, honor system. She knew from experience the sign-up sheets were collected but almost never looked at. She had gone out more than a handful of times under the instruction of the Hokage to collect the gate records and training ground sheets, only to have them organized into a folder and locked up in a cabinet never to be looked at again. So Sakura signed herself in, illegibly. After all, a sign with the rules was posted just right above it and she was breaking almost all of them. What should have looked like? Sakura Haruno 0729 looked more like Suhoa Hiwo 0889. She, carefully and more quietly than she would normally be, made her way to the training ground neighboring the one Kakashi used to take Team 7 to, room number 3. Sakura went into room number 4. She had been there once to pick up Ino for dinner. It was strange enough to be new but familiar enough to ease her nerves, if only a little. She pushed the wooden door open to a much warmer environment that startled her momentarily. The area consisted of a clearing surrounded by 4 dozen trees, a few boulders of rock, all surrounded by perfectly trimmed green grass. When she looked closer, Sakura noticed various footprint indents on the ground and that silently encouraged her to close the door. She took a breather as she examined the area with hesitant steps forward, and then paused. Her thumb came up towards her lips and she bit at her nail. This is a really bad idea, she thought to herself. Your idea? Inner Sakura released herself from blame. I should leave? You came here to test your skills? So test them, or have you forgotten? Her inner self chided. Sakura turned around on her heels and picked up half a dozen dartboards that were at the wall by the entrance. She began placing them all around the various trees and rock formations in the secluded room. She walked slowly so the only sound she could hear was the rhythm of her steps. There were no birds, no passing winds, nothing, pure and utter silence. It was like she was the only person alive and the entire planet had gone still. She sighed and tried to push aside all those post-apocalyptic books she recently read and resigned herself to thoughts which were of current importance. The kunoichi practiced her chakra control as she climbed up trees and hung the dartboards on various protruding branches. Some, the young ninja, hid behind leaves while others remained in plain view. Then she jumped down, again feeling slightly weary of the too quiet atmosphere. But it was past midnight, so the chances of anyone being at the training grounds were slim, and if they were, they'd probably be in the trap rooms or the Junin playrooms. Not the lowly training grounds used by recent academy graduates and undergraduates during the daytime. She stood in the middle of the room and closed her eyes. Okay, Inner Sakura began, you can do this. Out of the 6 dartboards and 12 kunais she had thrown, 9 missed, 2 landed on the outer circle. And the last one had hit a dartboard with the ring instead of the tip of the blade and fallen to the ground with a depressing thud. It was a terrible revelation. She wanted to break down and cry. She had gotten one of the highest scores in the academy for kunai throwing, but back then, the target board was huge and right in front of her. Aiming perfectly straight was easy. And now, and now. Stop, Inner Sakura screamed, what the hell did you expect? Something better, she muttered to herself aloud. The thought of just resigning her ninja title and becoming a Konoha medic started to look more and more appealing. It seemed as though she couldn't become an exception. The tears began to stream down her cheeks with abandon. She didn't have a right to complain. Her teammates did treat her how she deserved to be treated. She wouldn't have been able to take on one of those ninjas last mission. Being a hospital medic would be easier. Sure, her inner self agreed sarcastically. I bet everyone would be so impressed. At least then no one would be protecting you and we'd just be cooped up in a hospital all day, every day. Maybe we'd find ourselves a nice civilian boy to date. Mum would be proud, wouldn't she? Belittling herself caused her jaw to tighten. I can't do it, I'm not born into a powerful clan. I'm not the son of the third. I don't have the blood of, I can't. Sakura didn't think she could compete with them, she just couldn't. Her genetics were proof. She was just going to go give Tsunade her resignation of field duty and work off her internship at the hospital and then? Her inner self chipped in, then maybe some ninja in a mask will come to your door to tell you about Naruto's death due to stupidity. Or maybe all that inappropriate reading will finally catch up to Kakashi and heal. No, she whispered, drowning out her thoughts as she wiped her eyes roughly with the heel of her palm. No, she repeated with a greater emphasis as her inner self continued in the background of her thoughts. With determination, she walked out towards the trees to get back all the kunais she had thrown. She was going to try again. She had to try again, she couldn't be this useless. It had to be a fluke. 5 hours later, 2 breakdowns, and one very embarrassing mix of moaning and shouting, she was able to hit 8 target boards, and even had one at bullseye. Because she wasn't putting chakra into her attacks, she was physically tired but not drained. A smile graced her sweat-filled face. See? Yes, she answered herself. She did see. Practice was the key. With a strut she went to pick up all the kunais that had missed and gladly pulled out all those which hit their intended mark. After placing them back in her weapons pouch, She then returning the boards back to their original stack, and finally left the room, carefully, quietly, and looking a little too guilty if not slightly excited. Thankfully, Sakura was able to comfort herself with the belief that no one had seen her. Unbeknownst to her, she was seen by the Anbu guards hidden in the night guards on the rooftops, but they didn't even regard her important enough to acknowledge in their reports. When she got home, she set her alarm clock for 10 a.m. Kakashi said to meet at 8, she doubted he'd show up till noon. 1 week later, no one noticed her slight improvements at kunai throwing and she never said anything to bring their attention to the fact. Her team continued about their usual schedule and were sent on 2 lowly D-class missions inside Konoha that warranted a 2-hour moaning and complaining spree from their loud-mouthed blonde that was more exhausting than the actual work itself. During the day, if they weren't out on a mission, she was working her internship under Shizune at the hospital, and whenever Tsunade had free time, her mentor would give advice and loan out her medical scrolls to practice chakra control with. And every night past midnight, like clockwork, she was training little details that she thought needed fixing. After a few hard days, it finally stopped being self-pity and started becoming honest criticism. The night guards began to silently notice her trips to the training grounds. It wasn't anything worth reporting, but nightly sneak-outs by a pink-haired girl to the training grounds were admirable to say the least. The night guards already had bets on how long it would last since they'd seen other ninjas also attempt to reform themselves, only to cave in under pressure. Even 2 ANBU's guards were in on it. 1 month later, September, she had a dozen dartboards out. Every single one now landed in a bull's eye, and in the essence of improvement she continued to challenge herself. Now she spun around in place for 20 seconds to disorient herself before attempting to throw her kunais. She missed a lot at first, but then got better and better at identifying her targets and distinguishing them from the surroundings. She felt like squealing when she compared herself what she had been a little over a month ago. Once she got to the point where she was happy with herself, she spun around for a minute. The first time she attempted it, she fell to her knees and couldn't catch her balance for over an uncountable amount of time. So, instead, she tried again for 30 seconds and improved with that level of disorientation. Then 40 seconds, then 45. Till she worked her way up to a minute of spinning and being able to regain balance and orientation within seconds to shot out her kunais. She had already cost 6 night guard ninjas their week's salaries in unethical betting. Her training was starting to put a toll on her body. She changed from training every night to training 4 times a week, when she wasn't a mission, and went out of her way to discover methods to counter physical exhaustion with medical chakra jutsu. Tsunade taught her one in particular when Sakura lied about a bad dream that had kept her up as the excuse for her tiredness. All she had to do, her instructor explained offhandedly, was create a wave of soft healing chakra over her body, and its effects lasted twice as long as caffeine but did not work as well as a solider pill would have. Even so, it helped Sakura survive on very little sleep and continue to improve herself in secret. Still, no one voiced anything to her. A month later, October, she also began running every morning she could. It woke her up better than a cold shower and improved her speed and agility. Lee had once made it known that he was able to run 10 laps around Konoha without breaking a single sweat. She made half a lap her starter goal. Unfortunately, she failed miserably at the first attempt, but by the 3rd week she was able to get through half of Konoha without painfully gasping for breath. Eventually, she started to play games with herself to not get bored during her morning training. Run around that tree, jump over that garbage can, jump onto that branch, flip to the ground, run up those stairs, jump off that balcony. She was getting better and better, and was especially happy after an early snowstorm. Running on a foot and a half of snow took careful chakra control and was the best practice she could have asked for. Her once rare buy of white hot chocolate became a daily treat, since she was accomplishing so much and was able to afford the extra calories. Still, no one said anything to her. Many of the night guards no longer bet against her, but bet for her. What days would she train and what days she would run? A bar tab was the bet for Wednesday morning, while another bet weapon cleaning duty on Thursday morning. She became an expected sighting for them, and most of them began to mention sighting of her in their report. But still, every mission she was still placed in the background. Ignored. But it was okay for her, she didn't think she was good enough to be noticed or properly compared to her teammates, just yet. Her medical jutsu was also on the fast track of improvement. She had already assisted Shizune on 2 surgeries and led one simple deflated lung restoration all by herself, with Shizune overlooking, of course. A month later, November, she no longer just practiced kunai tosses, she practiced throwing everything she could. Knives, shurikens, swords, rocks, senbons, sticks. If she missed a target, she ran towards her weapon as quickly as possible, picked it up and tossed it at the first target she noticed. It kept her on her toes and she stopped seeing a miss as a failure, only as a reason to change up the situation for her benefit. A week later, the week between November and December, the toll on her social life became obvious as she declined more and more dinners with friends in favor of a nap before training. She had even skipped the winter festival and denied all the Christmas and New Year's parties. One early evening, Ino caught her on her way home from the hospital and said, "You know, forehead, people are starting to talk about you being depressed that Sasuke doesn't like you." "That's stupid," Sakura replied, running her fingers through her growing hair as they passed the last sections of the market square. Ino had interrupted her mental repetition of a medical procedure and Sakura was trying to find her place again. "Well, what are they supposed to think?" The pinklet didn't grace the blonde's rhetorical question with an answer, so Ino added, "I believe it." "Well, Ino pig, I'm not surprised," Sakura replied, giving her a disheartened look that said more than words ever could. "Really, Sakura, Naruto came to me, asking if he did something wrong. I told him obviously he did, but, I mean," the worry in her best friend's voice was painfully obvious. No matter how self-absorbed Ino could act, there was still an incredible soft spot for Sakura somewhere in the pretty purple color-loving girl's heart. An impregnated silence fell between them as Sakura became racked with guilt and wasn't even able to think of anything training relevant to avoiding emotional confrontation. She recalled Sasuke's face when she declined his invitation to the Uchiha Christmas party. Only the main branch was allowed to bring their teammates, everyone else had to be strictly Uchiha. It was such a big deal that even Kakashi had accepted. "I'm sorry," Sakura whispered, "are a lot of people worried?" "Naruto, Tenten, Lee, Hinata, and me, of course." Sakura cracked a smile and caved into the demands on young teenhood. "All right. Let's go out tonight then. All I'm saying is that if you, wait, really forehead?" "Yes, Ino pig," Sakura said, playfully pushing Ino's arm with her own. "We need to go shopping." Sakura laughed and nodded. Maybe she had been taking training a bit too seriously. 1 month later, December. Sakura modified her schedule to include at least 1 day out a week with either her team or Ino and the girls. It made her realize how lonely she had been feeling when training had turned her into a compulsively obsessed freak. Even though eating with Naruto and Sasuke was unpleasant, they always started competing or competing and fighting. On the plus side, she had gotten to know the shopkeeper and chief of the ramen stand pretty well. She had even asked Sasuke if she could still come to the dinner. He just nodded as an answer and Sakura went shopping with Tenten immediately afterwards for a dress appropriate for the occasion. Sadly, she didn't get to wear the beautiful green long-sleeved dress with a beautiful red bow. Tenten said it made her look like a present worth opening, because of an emergency medical call back when 3 4-man teams returned horribly beaten up in an ambush-turned-avalanche, unavoidable mudslide. Sakura spent Christmas Eve and Christmas Day reconnecting muscle fibers and the 26th passed out in the doctor's lounge. Sasuke's mother, who had once been close to the young girl's own mother, had made Sasuke give Sakura some leftovers after hearing about the hospital catastrophe. A week later, January, Tsunade called Sakura into her office after she had successfully restored a Junin's broken shoulder, her second time performing medical surgery unsupervised. "Hokage-sama," Sakura greeted her teacher with a bow. "So, how long did you think I wouldn't notice?" Notice?" She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the guilty look her face probably gave her away. "Sakura, is there anything you want to tell me?" Tsunade asked. The night guards had inquired about her from some office workers at the Hokage Tower, since she was kind of familiar, so he claimed. Shizune, obviously being concerned why Jonin men were asking about their little girl, had been prepared to use various torture methods of interrogation. They, on the other hand, were very willing to divulge Sakura's secret nightly visits, quickly followed by rapid reassurances that they were not plotting, inappropriately eyeing, or insulting the pink-haired kunoichi in any way, shape or form. Two of them were sent on trash missions for good measure. When the Hokage used the tone of being omnipotent, Sakura knew there was only one something that she had ever done wrong. A dozen thoughts ran through the young girl's head and she couldn't pick out an acceptable version of the truth or half-fib to try to tell in time. Hee, Sakura. Tsunade paused, a soft smile appearing on her face as though she had just recalled some memories. Alright, I'll bite. I have some poisons I need you to read up on. Shizune has the scrolls. I'll be testing you on them tomorrow. Oh, okay, thank you, Sakura said uneasily, unsure of how much the blonde knew but silently grateful that she hadn't vocalized anything. It would have been very embarrassing and the explanation of why would have made her wish to dig her own grave. And by the way, may I suggest Training Ground 13 if you want to practice reaction times? Sakura's face turned bright red as she stuttered some inaudible reply. Dismissed, Tsunade waved her off with a shot of sake in her hand and motherly smile. Sakura jolted out of the Hokage room as quick as a thief running from security. But as she made her way towards the hospital, a huge, borderline arrogant, smirk was plastered on her face. Someone had noticed. She had never gone into room 13 but she had read the training ground manual 3 times. The room was rigged with so many explosives and traps that there was a warning in its description in bright red bold letters. Sakura tried to forget what it said. The room was usually used by Junin and Anbu during their downtime. The concept behind awakening the room was to create a chakra web on the 4 corners of the room that activated all the traps, and if 2 chakra strings disappeared, all the traps disabled themselves under the presumption that said ninja was done or extremely hurt. She made sure her chakra reserves were at their max after she signed herself in. Her name was starting to look more and more like chicken scratch with every passing visit. Carefully, the kunoichi entered training room 13, nervously and hesitantly. One downside to the training rooms numbered 10 and up was that you never knew if it was being used unless you had high-level chakra sensory training. And someone was using room 13, and unfortunately she discovered that by sight. She should have left before her presence was detected, but she couldn't move. She was absolutely captivated. The ninja was beautiful, not only in appearance but in movement as well. The graceful gliding, the split-second decisions made to dodge a kunai being thrown from an unseen location in the room. The avoidance of exploding landmines. It was like watching an ancient dance that was reserved only for holy days and was incidentally taking place during Armageddon. He wore a complete black outfit, a black tank top with black pants, a weapons pouch strapped to his thigh, and a string of kunais and ninja stars hung around his belt. She also noticed a wakizashi sword still sheathed across his back. The man was dressed just like the ninjas from storybooks. Then suddenly the dancer stopped and a kunai was thrown straight for her face from his fingers. She squatted down, hands over her head, and squeaked loudly and embarrassingly, marginally avoiding the attack. "Who are you?" a deep mellow voice asked, pausing his training. There were no more activated traps, meaning that the ninja had probably let go of his chakra web. "Sakura Haruno. I'm sorry, I didn't know this room was being used." She shouted so quickly that the words tumbled over one another. She was trembling in fear and unable to look up. Those bright red eyes that connected with hers moments before the kunai was aimed to her face had terrified her into absolute submission. Those were the eyes of a ruthless killer, and she felt like a prey being noticed by a predator. She was a deer in the domain of the lion. "Stand up." The voice was very close and Sakura wished she knew teleporting jutsu. But since she didn't, and wouldn't be able to do it anyway, teleporting jutsu required stable heart rate, which was why they were rarely used in battles. Her heartbeat was currently topping 200 beats a minute. She obeyed his undeniable command, her hands dropping to her side, her eyes avoiding his. Instead she focused on his black sandals. Anbu issued. "You're not a Junin," was the cold statement that slipped from his lips. No sir, but the Hokage told me Aiko could train here, for reaction time." She felt more nervous than Hinata when she was confronted with Naruto in a close-quarter situation. "HN," was his familiar response. "Go ahead." Then, his invitation was in the same tone as every other word he uttered and Sakura had a hard time computing it. But when the silence became just too unbearable, she finally looked up, his face expressionless, his eyes onyx, his long black hair, and his deep lines under his eyes all shouted familiarity at her. Then a breath later it hit, he was an Uchiha, and by the looks of it, from the main branch. "Uchiha-san," She gasped, looking back down out of a mixture of shame and respect. "I'm really so. You came here to practice, go ahead." His hand reached out towards her face. She flinched, her whole entire body tensed, and she closed her eyes tightly, the most un-shinobi thing she could have done in that possible moment, short of soiling her underwear. But he only retrieved the kunai he had thrown into the door behind her. "I won't interrupt," he added, placing it back into his weapons pouch. "Oh, okay. Thank you," she said, bowing as low as the short distance between them would allow her to. Her eyes still half closed and directed at his shoes. He stepped aside and she nervously, legs shaking and obviously breathing abnormally, moved to the center of the room. He turned around, assessing the damage that his training had done, and then returned his gaze back at intruder as he leaned his back against the door and crossed his arms. He had noticed her right away, but disregarded her presence, knowing she was an ally of Konoha and thinking that she would leave immediately. That was the general unspoken rule on occupied rooms. She obviously either didn't know, didn't belong, or didn't know how to sense occupied rooms. Itachi assumed it was a disappointing mixture of all three. Sakura Haruno, that name sounded familiar. He racked his brain, and the name was repeated in his mother's voice. The Uchiha mistress had mentioned her a few times. "When will Sakura come over? How is Sakura? Did you give Sakura the pie I made?" Now Itachi remembered. Sakura was the teammate of his younger brother. Having been on a year-long mission and only recently returning, meant he missed quite a bit of information about Sasuke's life. The little he remembered Sasuke mentioning about her was that she was annoying and weak, but he also recalled hearing about her from someone else. He thought deeper as he stared at her, trying to recall every detail he was told, because there had to be something that would explain this 1 a.m. visit to a room that was restricted from anyone under Jonin. He watched her inhale deeply, trying to calm her nerves and shyly stealing a glance at him, no doubt, wishing he'd leave. He didn't have any plans on leaving. If she was stupid enough to come here before at least passing the Chunin exam, then she was probably stupid enough to make a rookie mistake and die. He felt her connect a web to one corner, then another, and then the last two at the same time. A landmine triggered where she stood. She reacted too late and was propelled by the explosion to the right. A kunai shot out from one of the walls towards her leg. Once more she noticed it too late and was stabbed. She definitely needed reaction practice, but this room was too advanced for her. Her team was supposed to build her reflexes during training. She landed on a branch, gasping, wide-eyed, obviously surprised by the danger of the room. Itachi had managed to make it look so easy. Another kunai shot out from the opposite wall towards her face. She took the kunai out of her injured leg and aimed to the one coming towards her, blocking it midair. An explosion tag went off on the tree she was resting. Itachi saw a big gush form on her shoulder blade from her incompetent movement to avoid a spiked piece of bark. She still didn't remove her chakra web from the corners. She landed on the ground, more skillfully than how she fell, only to have a set of shurikens come at her from every direction. She put chakra at her feet and propelled herself forward to a high jump, not registering the second set of 10 shurikens coming towards the height of her jump. The room reacted on probability. As a ninja, you had to choose the improbable paths to outwit your enemy. She got stabbed by 6 of the shurikens. Itachi flinched slightly from hearing her groan of pain as she flipped out of the way of an explosion tag. She had at least managed to anticipate that one. He watched as she dislodged the shurikens that were logged in her arm and threw them at the 8-point ninja stars coming at her while dodging the large shuriken that came to sweep her head off. She did pretty average for a beginner. Itachi had to give her that. She deflected the oncoming weapons with a near-perfect aim and was almost 1 full minute inside the room and not dead or unconscious yet. During his first time, he was about her age. Itachi had managed to last a full 7 minutes in the room before getting injured, but his injury was a centimeter-deep cut by a shuriken that only scrapped him. She deflected another round of kunai attacks from her right and evaded most of the ninja stars on the left, but she had gotten stabbed deeply in her left calf, which made her center of gravity questionable at best. He watched her flip to the floor, landing with most of her weight on the less injured leg. She caught her balance by taking any extra step and bent down to remove the kunai from her calf, a regrettable mistake. Unfortunately, she didn't expect the landmine that she had stepped on to go off instantly. Her body was flung against the tree. All her chakra webs disappeared at the same time. Itachi sighed as he walked towards her bleeding body, prepared to take her to the hospital. What first startled him was that she wasn't unconscious, and what really surprised him was that her hands were glowing green as she held them over her abdomen. She knew medic jutsu. It could explain her desire to work up her reaction time, Itachi thought. Anbu field medics were given a test similar to Training Grounds Room 13 and had to not get hit for 90 minutes. That also explained why there was only one active Anbu medic in Konoha. Most medics who assisted in Anbu missions were hand-picked jonin. He squatted beside her silently and watched her work. She ignored him, whether out of pride or concentration he wasn't sure. The Uchiha wouldn't have put it past her to have forgotten his presence altogether from the adrenal and consecutive near-death experiences. She exhaled sharply before beginning to cough up blood. "God damn, stupid fucking I swear," she muttered with a bloody mouth as her hands traveled up to her chest. Itachi assumed from the position of her hand and bloody mouth, she was healing her lungs. When she finished with her lungs, she glanced at him. "Sorry for having to make you watch that pathetic display of lack of skill." Itachi didn't reply as he continued to observe her as she bent her leg, flinched, and dislodged a kunai and shuriken from her right thigh and 2 other kunais and a ninja from her left. She healed those parts half-assed, obviously wanting to conserve her chakra. He was slightly impressed at the amount of pain she was willing to bear with, only whispering a flutter of curses under her breath. "So, Uchiha-san, since you..." She paused and then grunted, seemingly having an internal argument with herself. "Can you..." She paused again, knotted her brows and exhaled sharply. Her teeth were still stained with blood. "Sit me up. And put my right hand on my shoulder. I can't move my back." He placed his left hand on the back of her neck and leaned her off of the tree. Then he lifted her right hand and bent it up and over her head so she could reach the huge gush on her shoulder that was streaming blood down her back. "Tth thanks," she muttered as Itachi held her in place. "I haven't been able to emit medical chakra from anywhere other than my hands yet." She flinched slightly as she split out saliva intermixed with blood on the other side before getting to work on her shoulder. Itachi knew she hadn't injected any numbing chakra into her body, unsure if she didn't know how to or if she was a masochist. "You're really good at this room," she muttered as he watched the muscles reconnect with one another, covering the bone that had been exposed from the hole in her jacket. "So, what's your..." She breathed in deeply. "Name?" "Itachi Uchiha. Itaida, Sasuke's older brother?" He nodded. Makoto and Fugaku had told her about Itachi. Youngest to graduate the academy. Youngest Anbu. Then youngest to make Anbu Kapitan, and Sasuke never said a single bad thing about his brother. He idolized him like a god. But anytime she visited the Uchiha compound, the eldest son was always gone. So she wrote him off as one of those elusive ninjas, or a legend the head of the Uchiha clan tells outsiders for reputation's sake. Sakura chuckled in a half-mad kind of way. "Great. Perfect. Just my luck, you know. Lady Luck is also known as misfortune." A noticeable smirk appeared at the corner of his lips, but she didn't see since her eyes were closed in concentration. A thin layer of skin appeared on the back of her shoulder blade slowly. "Why is it a misfortune that I am here?" he asked. "I believe that it was fortunate. Though without my being here you may have eventually learned how to expel healing chakra in other parts of your body due to instincts of self-preservation. Or you may have bled to death." The way he spoke so nonchalantly made Sakura shiver. Yes, she could have very well bled to death. Can you?" Sakura stopped speaking as her hand's medical glow began to fade. She was obviously out of chakra. Itachi removed her hand from behind her and let it drop gently on her stomach as he slowly lowered her back in a position so she could lean against the tree behind her. Itachi did it for a number of reasons, one of them being to decrease her chance of asphyxiation. "Can I what?" he asked coolly. "Not tell Sasuke about me being here?" This brought a slight intrigue into his mind. He hadn't even entertained the thought of informing his brother. "Why?" he asked, watching her open her eyes slowly. Bright clover green eyes stared at him and then looked away before they closed again. She tried to even out her breathing and calm her racing heart. She didn't respond, and so he waited. He may have waited 10 or 15 minutes before she finally spoke again, and it wasn't to his question either. "You can leave. It'll probably be another few hours before I can fix my sprained ankle and walk. Promise I won't bleed to death." He didn't move and remained squatted beside her. "Okay." Sakura sighed again after getting the unspoken message from the Anbu. "Since you're adamant about making me feel like a complete pathetic loser, do you mind reaching into my weapons pouch and getting out my index cards?" I can't sit up or move that leg at the moment without feeling like I'm having tea with the devil in his torture chamber. After a moment of consideration, he reached into the weapons pouch in her thigh and felt for paper-like material. He got out a stack of thin cards. He looked at them. He estimated that there were nearly 100 of them. He flipped the first card to see what was written on the back. Sakura tilted her head slightly. They're study cards on some poisons. Marina too, Itachi said. Found in Suna, blooms only at night. The petals aren't poisonous. Only the stem is through touch and ingestion. They are usually blue and smell similar to red roses. To harness them, the stem needs to be kept in room temperature water for a day, then taken out and sliced into pieces and boiled in the same water. That water is odorless and tasteless and is 60 to 70% poison. Causes nausea and, depending on the dosage, hallucinations. Can be treated through induced vomiting if ingested, she replied almost robotically. I'm so. Tulips of spring, he interrupted her as he flipped to the next card. They're found in the land of spring, blooming all year round. They're not poisonous in their natural state, but when they are mixed with salt water and seaweed extract they make a deadly sleeping potion. If it's inhaled, it can be cured through lung purification surgery. If it's ingested, there are no safe methods of removing it and will have to be waited out. And if it's ingested, there's a high probability of coma occurring. Sira Taru, he continued, and Sakura relaxed, closing her eyes as she answered. After going through the cards once, Sakura only made 6 minor mistakes. The second time around she knew them by heart, and at the end of the third drill she had accumulated enough chakra from the rest to fix her ankle. Itachi once more held her up by the back of her neck so she could lean forward to work her magic on her ankle. Once she was done, the Anbu helped her up, and even though she was about to protest, he placed his arm around her shoulders to help her walk. The fleeting look he gave said "shut up" in about 8 different languages to her. When they walked out of the training ground, the sun was already coming up. "Where do you live?" he asked as they walked out towards the streets. Red complex apartment in Mushu Square." "Alone?" he asked, since that area was cheap and used to be an orphanage house but now was known for housing adult singles and teen ninjas. "Yeah," she quickly changed the subject. "Would it be too crazy to ask if we could speed up? I really don't want to be seen drenched in blood, and stores are about to." Itachi silenced her as he picked her up bridal style and jumped onto the roof of a building with stealth she had only witnessed from Kakashi when he was being serious. Before she blinked again, Itachi was standing on the roof of her building. "Wow, thanks a lot," she said as the man settled her down. She took a step back and bowed low to him. "I really appreciate everything you've done, Uchiha-san." "Thank you." She straightened up, slightly swaying from loss of balance, and then with a smile on her face, "I'll see you around." "Maybe," she said with a slight awkward wave as she walked towards the door of the roof. Itachi didn't respond as he watched her leave. There was no fear in her eyes, no quiver in her voice as she said goodbye. He was about to leave when he noticed he was still carrying her study cards, but for some reason decided against going and disturbing her. He'd return them later, she didn't need them after all, she had them memorized perfectly anyway. When Itachi arrived home, his mother was making breakfast and his younger brother was sitting in the kitchen going over some old scrolls. "Itachi, why are you bleeding?" his mother asked, wiping her hands on a towel before disappearing from the kitchen and reappearing in the hallway where he was taking off his shoes. Her son was home for a mandatory break, and that meant no life-death missions for a week. She quickly scanned his body for injuries. His brother looked up and raised an eyebrow at the scene. "It's not mine," he responded as he put on his house slippers. "I thought you were on break?" Sasuke asked loudly, glancing at his brother's red blotched clothes. He kissed his mother and nodded to his brother. "I was in the training grounds with someone," he replied honestly, and before either of his family members could ask with who, he added, "I am going to take a shower," and carefully made his way upstairs. "Don't get blood on the floor," Makoto said, rolling her eyes. "Can we train later?" Sasuke shouted from the kitchen, hopeful but still prepared for rejection. Itachi paused on the second floor platform and replied conditionally, "If you're still home when I return." Sasuke smiled widely and very un-Uchiha-like. Makoto sighed, "Mission this, training that," as she walked back into the kitchen. "Really? You too," she ruffled her youngest hair, "are driving your mother crazy." Sasuke replied, picking up the scroll again. Kakashi said he would teach him something special as soon as he improved his Sharingan. The young shinobi had a feeling that something special was the Chidori, so the young boy had dug up some of the scrolls on the Sharingan elemental techniques and would be interrogating his brother with tons of questions later. His mother had refused to answer anything, though she did offer to train with him so he could discover the answers on his own. He opted out of it in hopes of Itachi being willing. He only had 3 more hours till training with his team, and he wanted to create a feasible plan of practice in his head before then. Time management-wise, it would be economically better if Itachi would explain the portions in the scroll that he was having difficulties interpreting. His mother would keep him locked in a genjutsu for 12 hours just to teach him something that could be taught with one sentence. Kakashi's laziness was starting to rub off on the youngest Uchiha heir. After Sakura showered and applied first aid on all the wounds that she didn't want to spend her chakra on, she dressed for training with Team 7. Her shoulder was still very stiff and putting on her dress top felt like torture. Her ankle was also in bad shape, which made walking feel like a workout. As the young ninja made her way towards the arranged meeting place, she stopped by the coffee shop and ordered herself a cup of half-black coffee and half-white chocolate with 4 double shots of espresso in it. The man behind the counter stared at her dumbfounded for a moment, but quickly shrugged and muttered something about ninjas being insomniacs and having no sense of taste. She was contemplating using a solider pill before leaving the cafe, but her incredibly sore ankle told her the long-term consequences would be most undesirable. Instead, she continued pulsing a soft stream of morphine chakra into her entire leg and tried her best to not place an undesirable amount of pressure on it. She was the last to arrive, save for Kakashi. Sasuke and Naruto were already arguing about clan symbols. She sipped her hot beverage as she sat a few meters away from them. Quietly eavesdropping on whatever stupid topic they decided that was worth trying to smash each other's brains in. "It is not a Pokeball, you dumbass," Sasuke said. "Is too, have you not looked at it?" "I have, and unlike you, I'm not blind or stupid enough to associate it with a children's cartoon." "Teme, you ass." Naruto throw the first punch. Sasuke the first kick. Sakura sighed, and at that moment, tired, cranky, and in pain, she wondered why the hell she wanted their attention in the first place. About 20 minutes later, a bruise for Sasuke's forearm and a black eye for Naruto, Kakashi arrived in a puff of white smoke with his favorite porno book in hand. "You're late," Sasuke and Naruto yelled. Sakura was busy savoring the last of her beverage to bother. She was also afraid that if she spoke, her voice might crack and someone would notice the pain she was trying to disguise in a neutral expression. Plus, she was comfortable sitting on the ground under the shade where her ankle, which had swollen to the point of making her shoe feel uncomfortably tight, could rest. Kakashi could have been another hour late for all she cared. There was this old woman who needed help crossing the street and "Lair," the 2 boys yelled. Kakashi gave Sakura a curious glance as she licked her lips after her last sip. Then he shrugged his shoulders hopelessly and closed his book. "My dear students," Kakashi began sweetly as he looked back at the 2 boys in front of him, "change of plans. Since the Chunin exams are coming up in 3 months, and I recommended you 3, he paused to add an exaggerated sigh, "it's best if we break up for the most optimum results. Sasuke's with me, Naruto, Jiraiya and Sakura." When he glanced at Sakura, she was already walking away, and he would have noticed the limp in her step if he looked for a moment longer. "Tsunade," he added while rubbing the back of his head. "Did you 2 do something?" "What? No?" the blonde answered immediately. Kakashi shook his head. "Come, Sasuke." "Naruto," Jiraiya said, "he's by his usual place." "Girls' bathhouse, damn pervert sage," Naruto muttered as he walked away. The difference between Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Tsunade was that Kakashi and Jiraiya had unlimited time to dedicate to their students. Tsunade didn't. Sadly, when Sakura went into Tsunade's office, it happened to be one of those times where the responsibilities of being a Hokage came before teaching responsibilities. Tsunade apologized and told Sakura to report for hospital duty. Sakura nodded and left without much of a complaint. She was still tired from the morning training and needed to find some ice to ease the swelling. The day went by relatively quickly, and most of her patients were coming in for their belated flu shots or checkups. There was one rib that needed to be reset and one wound that needed stitches. The girl opted out of a chakra sew-up, and for that Sakura couldn't have been happier. The less chakra wasted, the more morphine for her leg. Her last patient of the day was a welcome surprise. It was Iruka. "Good afternoon, Iruka-sensei," Sakura greeted as she walked into the room, taking out his patient sheet. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked. "I seem to have some sort of allergy to something. It's a rash," he replied. "Alright, let me see," Sakura asked professionally. "You have really grown up, Sakura," her old teacher complimented her as he began to untuck his civilian shirt. "Oh," she blushed as she wrote down his medical complaint. Thank you, but it's not all that true." "Please, you're already a prized medic, don't think I don't hear the rumors," he replied, lifting his shirt up with a smile as Sakura placed her file down and walked towards him. "I still have a lot to go. I can't do surgery alone yet and most of my diagnoses have to be checked by Shizune. But I am coming along," she said, downplaying her abilities as she bent down to get a better look at the bluish rash near his navel. "It's a food allergy," Sakura stated, glancing at it with a scrutinizing eye. "I'm going to inject some chakra and check the contents of your stomach and intestines, alright? You're the medic. Medic in training," she added as her hand touched his abdomen and she closed her eyes in intense concentration. Tsunade and Shizune would be able to do something like this in less than 2 seconds, but it took Sakura a good minute to discover what was causing the reaction. The banana bread you ate was not baked properly. The uncooked yeast triggered the reaction, Sakura said, removing her hand. "I'll prescribe you lotion for the rash, but it should go away in 2 to 3 days. If you bought the bread, you may want to inform the bakery." She picked up his chart again and wrote something in it. "Oh, no," he chuckled. "I was experimenting at baking, though I should probably warn some friends of mine." Sakura smiled warmly as she grabbed a prescription pad from her desk. "Hey, next time, keep it in the oven longer. Well, here's your prescription and it was nice to see you again, sensei." "Wait, Sakura." She turned around. "Yes? I don't see enough of you around. If there's ever anything you need, remember you can come to me." "I'm still your sensei," he smiled warmly as he fixed his shirt. He was silently acknowledging the unfairness that Sakura received when it came to teachers and time dedicated to her. The young medic in training didn't know if it was pity or empathy that propelled Iruka to say that. "Oh, thank you," she bowed down to waist level. "I am doing alright," she said, straightening up. "I hope you have a nice day. Wait, actually, sensei, I do have a question." Sakura paused, looking for Iruka's permission to continue. He motioned her to do so. "What makes Sasuke and Naruto able to learn things like the Rasengan and Chidori? I mean, I know they're still at the basic stage of it, but I've heard rumors that Sasuke was going to be learning the whole shebang. Could I learn something like that?" Sakura had wanted to ask that a long time ago, but it felt like such a stupid question. Maybe. But those had to do with their elemental affiliation. If you're not of that element, it would be harder for you to learn something like that, and I believe that Chidori is a Sharingan-only ability. How do I go about learning, my element? You know the ninja store a few blocks away from the academy? Yes, sir, Sakura nodded. Well, they have elemental papers. You buy one and concentrate your chakra on them. You'll figure out your element then. But some people have 2 affiliations and some even more. The dominant one will show up on the paper. The second you figure out with training. That's of course if you have a second one. Thank you, Iruka-sensei. Anytime, Sakura. Remember, I'm still here if you have anything else to ask. I'm okay, I was only curious about that. Have a good day, he smiled, and she smiled back as she headed to the nurse's station to return his file. After her morning shift, Sakura went to see Tsunade again, but she was told by Shizune that the meeting with the elders was running late due to their inability to compromise. The dean of medicine quizzed Sakura on the poisons that she had to learn for the week, and then after complimenting Sakura, Shizune apologetically had to dismiss her when an emergency surgery came up. It was above Sakura's current skill level and clearance. Apparently it was confidential, and so she headed out of the Hokage Tower without feeling very accomplished. Sakura wasn't bitter over it. Sure, she wished she could have her own teacher in the way Sasuke and Naruto had, but it was okay. She didn't mind. She tried to convince herself of that, but she could feel her inner self roll her eyes. She ordered herself up another half coffee, half white chocolate with 3 double shots espressos before heading home for her long-deserved rest. The next day, she skipped out of her morning run, causing 2 losing ninjas cleaning duty. Even though her ankle was being more compliant and required less pain-killing chakra, she knew better than to agitate it this early. Thankfully, since she did not use her chakra up to heal her ankle, The surgery she was called in to assist with a young civilian who had weakening muscles went surprisingly smoothly. After the muscle cleansing, the entire day passed by quickly with very little traffic in the hospital. She was even let go an hour before her shift ended. So after picking up a cup of plain white chocolate, telling herself that she deserved it, she headed towards the academy. She went to the ninja store and purchased the paper Iruka told her about. She had done as he instructed in front of the store manager, who offered to help her, and the man stated that the kunoichi's element was water when the paper became damp. Sakura thanked the clerk and left quickly to the library. She planned to check out as many items as possible on water jutsu. It wasn't like anyone else was going to teach her. She didn't even know anyone in Konoha who was affiliated with water. She had learned from her earlier training. She couldn't expect to learn something like the Chidori all at once. She wasn't like Sasuke or Naruto. She needed practice. It took her a while to be able to hit the darts perfectly, and now she was able to do so while disoriented, upside down, running, flipping, and everything in between. Baby steps. That's all she needed. A mile was only made up of a lot of steps, and eventually, she knew that she'd be leaping through. She stepped into the library, tossing her empty drink before entering, and went to greet an old lady wearing a brooch of stacked books. She was sitting at the reference desk and politely asked about where the scrolls containing information on the water element and water jutsu were located. The woman asked to see Sakura's ninja card and then explained to Sakura that she only had access to the basics, which were located on the first floor under reference W and W2. The young ninja bowed and headed over to the prescribed location without complaint. Her leg twitched slightly as she lost focus of morphine concentration. "Damn it," she muttered as she placed a hand on the shelf for momentary balance support. "Honestly, Itachi, seriously, haven't you learned that ignorance is bliss?" "Because it really is," Shisui said as he and his younger cousin walked down the stairs to the first floor of the library. "Ignorance is the leading cause of death in the shinobi world." "No, being killed is the leading cause of death for shinobis," Shisui countered cheekily. Before Itachi could insult his cousin, a loud clang caught their attention. There, he saw Sakura with an armful of scrolls, having dropped half on her way to the checkout desk. "Ah, pink hair. So cute," Shisui said, and before Itachi could stop him, he flickered from his current position and appeared in front of the embarrassed girl. Itachi was tempted to sigh. Shisui had admitted to wanting to befriend every single person in Konoha to prove that Uchihas could be nice, decent human beings. Apparently Sakura was next on his list. "Hey there, cutie," he greeted. His surprise appearance caused all of the scrolls she had managed to pick up to drop back to the floor, and this time not because of a shock of pain from her ankle. Itachi tried to hold back a chuckle as he watched from the distance. His cousin had absolutely no tact sometimes. "Sorry," Shisui laughed softly as he helped her pick up the fallen items. "Quite a bit of reading material you have here," he added with a smile, trying to calm the obviously nervous girl. I like to read," she said, glancing around the room. All eyes were on her, and apparently I also like to attract unwanted attention, she added in a half mutter. "Ah, no worries," Shisui said, placing some scrolls on the checkout table as Sakura placed the rest nearby. "My name's Shisui Uchiha." "Sakura Haruno," she replied, wondering if she had bought some Attract Uchiha shampoo recently. "If you did, I bet crazy fangirls would pay a ton," her inner self joked as she tried to keep her nerves at bay. The Uchihas were too handsome for their own damn good. She felt like a peasant talking to a prince. "Ma'am, can I see your card?" the librarian asked, and Sakura nodded as she retrieved it from her medical pouch and handed it to the young man behind the counter. "So what you reading about?" Shisui asked. Itachi noticed her obvious distress and went to get his cousin away from her. Shisui had better intentions than Genma, but he still came on too strong to those who didn't know him. Especially being of Uchiha blood known for being silent and to themselves. A gene that seemed to have skipped Shisui and left a social butterfly defect in its place. "I'm Lear, Uchiha-san." "Hello." Sakura greeted Itachi with a bow. "Wah, you know my cuz? Man, Itachi, you never told me you knew such a cutie." "Please excuse my pedophile of a cousin," Itachi replied harshly. "It's okay." Sakura gave a genuine smile. All her previous nervousness vanished. "I should have been more careful in carrying all the scrolls." "Well, if you..." Itachi interrupted Shisui from continuing. We'll be going now, apologies for disturbing you. Thank you for the help Uchiha-san, she said to Shisui. Shisui, please. No Uchiha-saning, I feel like an old bastard. Let's go, you old bastard, Itachi said, pulling his cousin away by a chunk of untamed hair. Sakura smiled faintly as she watched them leave. Then she wondered if Itachi was going to be training that night. When Sakura got home, she settled in her couch and began reading through the first scroll of information. Unfortunately, since she didn't get a chance to appropriately replenish her medical chakra, the need for extra sleep caught up with her and she soon passed out. She woke up at 2 in the morning with a stiff neck, a stinging pain in her ankle, and sore shoulders. After she healed it completely, finally having the chakra to properly restore the nerves and repair muscles fibers and no worry for saving her chakra for work, she went to change so she could actually sleep in her own bed, but instead she disappointedly discovered that she was unable to fall into the realm of unconsciousness. Besides, it was 2 in the morning, perfect time to go train. So rather than stare at the ceiling for hours, she jumped out of bed with renewed vigor and changed again into her Tai Chi outfit, grabbed her weapons pouch, strapped it on and headed to the training grounds. At first she wanted to go directly to the 13th room, but hesitated. She really didn't have the energy to handle another session with that room. She only wanted to watch Itachi expertly maneuver it, but that was a little too creepy, even for her, so she settled into going to the 5th training room. She'd been there once before with her team when Kakashi wanted to practice water walking. Remembering what she read from the scrolls before passing out, she walked confidently into the room, glad that there was a waterfall that made the room feel alive and loud. She took off her jacket and pants, placing it on dry land, wearing only her spandex shorts and black tank top. She was going to get soaked, and she liked the idea of being able to at least walk home partially dry. She stabilized her chakra on her feet and walked across the lake in the middle of the room to the deepest part. Then she sat down Indian style, placed her palms on her knees and relaxed in the position. Slowly, she moved and laid down, all the while remaining above water. She did her best not to get wet. Then she got up and walked around again. She continued this for an hour before depleting a good chunk of her chakra and eventually returned home slightly disappointed in her lack of physical practice, but knowing that it was best to build a proper base for her water training. Diplomats from a wealthy trade village had arrived in the morning, so Tsunade was busy entertaining and being politically savvy, leaving Sakura to her own devices. The young ninja had completed the morning and afternoon shift in the hospital before returning home, drinking hot white chocolate and reading more on water chakra-based practices. Sakura had been sitting on the kitchen counter reading her scrolls while eating the rest of her sandwich that she prepared as dinner for the past 2 hours when words started to mesh together and she felt overwhelmed. She let out a soft sigh as she placed the scroll down and looked around her apartment. Some areas were already collecting dust, but she didn't feel like taking care of it. What felt like suddenly, although it had probably been accumulating the entire day, a tear escaped her eye. Then another, and another. Before she knew it, she was sobbing quietly to herself. Over what, she couldn't place a finger on, but she knew enough to know that she wanted someone to hug her. It only took 10 minutes to be able to regain control over herself. Unfortunately, the feelings continued to linger. When the clock struck midnight, she returned to the water room training room and quickly took off her Tai Chi jacket and pants to start practicing. She walked onto the middle of the lake and sat down with her palms beside her. 10 minutes later, she released her chakra energy and allowed her body to dip lower and lower till the water was around her chest. Then she used chakra to cause herself to float back up. It was harder than she imagined. It posed the same problem Sakura had with distributing concentrated bursts of healing chakra to other parts of her body. It was easy to place any type of chakra around one's hands or feet, everywhere else took practice. So Sakura practiced. She dipped her body again, this time up to the chin, and strained every muscle she had to use her chakra to push herself back up without moving any part of her body. She succeeded till her stomach and then drowned. She swam herself back to the surface and gasped for air. She hadn't expected her chakra to give out so suddenly, and she had been doing so well too. The green-eyed girl sighed, brushed her hair out of her eyes, and concentrated the chakra onto the palm of her hands and lifted herself over the water, sitting comfortable once more. One of the scrolls she read said once she was able to sink in the water with control and float back up while standing, she'd be ready to practice simple water manipulation jutsu. Just like medical jutsu, Water jutsu required excellent chakra control. She inhaled deeply and exhaled loudly as she tried again. She lost control more times than she'd like to admit, and the water wasn't getting any warmer either, but she refused to stop until she completed a full resurface at least once. On her 12th try, she had sunk herself up to her chin and then slowly floating herself back up. "Come on, you can do it." Inner Sakura cheered her on as she got her entire torso out of the water. Almost there, almost there. Are you trying to drown yourself? Lost it. Sakura fell right into the water with a loud yelp. She swam back up to the surface by the bank of land, and when she looked up to where she heard the voice, she was greeted with Itachi's expressionless face. Without thinking of respect or manners, she splashed him once with a sweep of her hand in anger. "You jerk, I almost had it." The wet pinklet splashed him again immaturely while giving him a dirty look. No one had ever splashed him before, except Shisui, but his older cousin was an idiot, or called him a jerk. He glared at her as water dripped down his face. He could seriously kill her faster than she could blink. Where the hell had respect for one's elders gone? He watched her as she placed her open palms on the water and lifted herself up on it as if it was a solid object. When she finally stood up on the water, she bowed. "I'm sorry, I've just been training to try and get this right. The scroll said that this will help water jutsu control. And I'm sorry for calling you a jerk, and splashing you, Uchiha-san." "Water jutsu?" he asked calmly. "I found out my element is water, and Naruto and Sasuke are going to learn cool techniques associated with their element. And I just don't want to, be useless," she answered, avoiding eye contact. "Why don't you ask your sensei for assistance if you're struggling? Find me a sensei that doesn't have other responsibilities and I will," Sakura replied with a hopelessly saddened expression. Even Iruka had other responsibilities which took priority over her. "Do it again," Itachi commanded, and Sakura watched his Sharingan activate. She froze. Those bright red eyes terrified her. "Do it again," he stated again. "Ignore the eyes." "Me?" she asked dumbly. Itachi just glared at her as a response. "Oh, okay?" Sakura nodded hesitantly to herself and walked towards the center of the lake and sat down Indian style once more. She closed her eyes tightly and tried again, dipping her body lower and lower. Then when the water was near her chin, she began floating upwards, only to get up to her navel before losing control and falling back into the depths of the water. When Sakura swam back up, she was surprised to see Itachi standing on the water next to her. In the meantime, he had discarded his weapons pouch and shirt near her outfit and stood beside her with only his shortened fatted pants and loose-fitted black shirt. His eyes were onyx again. "Get up," he said, and she obeyed. "Stand up," he corrected when she positioned herself to sit. But the scroll said doing it while standing is harder and I don't think I'm." "Shut up," he said, and she did. His dominating presence was overwhelming. "Concentrate on the outline of my chakra. I'm going to make it more obvious than it would normally be." Sakura watched his whole body glow a soft red, then the redness died out at his feet and he began to sink. His chakra wrapped around his body became less and less in areas that sunk underwater till his whole body was under. Then he floated up and she noticed that the thin layer of chakra which was underwater became a thick layer as he floated himself back up. "Do I have to explain or did you understand?" he asked calmly after he situated himself over the water and looked down on her. "I think I understand," she said. "Sitting is easier to those with lack of chakra control, but to those with, it's a waste of time, and since your output of chakra is inconsistent, it's even more pointless." "Okay." Sakura inhaled deeply and repeated Itachi's chakra distribution, slowly decreasing the chakra around her feet, then knees, then thighs, and then all the way till she was fully underwater. Then she began to push herself up by increasing her chakra around her head first, then neck, then shoulders, till she got up to her thighs and then lost control and fell back into the water. When she climbed back on top, the look of disappointment was evident. She didn't do a good job of hiding her emotions. "You weigh less underwater, so you need less chakra to balance, but when you're above ground you need to place more chakra on your body to push it up. When you climb down the swimming pool steps, you don't use that much energy, but when you climb out of the water you have to grip the poles harder, right?" Sakura nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. He was right. Climbing out of the pool stairs was harder than climbing up down. "Can I try again?" she asked him. He remained stoic and glared at her. She took that as a yes. She sunk her body into the water slowly, till her entire head was underwater and then slowly began to float up. Up, up, up. Her knees were above the water, then her shins, almost there, finally her feet. I did it, Sakura squealed, completely exhausted and drained but exceptionally happy. Doing it once doesn't mean you can do it. Do it 100 times and then you can say you've done it. Fine, that's number 1. Number 2 coming up, she said with a challenging smirk. Itachi was amazed. Just 10 minutes ago she looked like the world was going to end and now she was smiling and being bubbly. He watched her float down, noticing how she wasn't scared or careful anymore. She was doing it as if she knew how to do it. That was a very important part of learning techniques. If you did them like you were learning them, then you'd always have troubles. Every technique needed to be executed as if it's been done 1,000 times before, no matter if that was true or not. She was floating back up, slower than last time, but still using a good amount of chakra. He watched as her torso came up above the water, and then her hips, slowly her thighs came up over the water. Then her chakra disappeared, not out of failure, but out of exhaustion and depletion. As she fell into the water, out of reflex Itachi grabbed her arm and pulled her up so she wouldn't go under. Partially unsure if she would drown if she did fall in with such low chakra, and partially out of instinct to save a fellow ninja. He held her wrist above him till he felt her develop enough chakra in her feet to stand on the water. Then he let her go slowly. She inhaled deeply as she stumbled carefully towards land and then sat down with her legs in the water, trying to catch her breath. She looked up at him with her bright emerald green eyes. Was that 100 consecutively or 100 altogether? His lips itched to smirk but he remained expressionless as he asked, "What do you think?" 100 more to go then, she said, falling backwards and laying her upper body on the earth. Itachi walked over to the area of discarded clothing and grabbed his weapons pouch and began to tie it around his thigh. "Uchiha-san, is your element water?" "Fire." "Oh," she muttered. A moment of complete silence passed. "But I know a lot of water jutsu," he said, grabbing his vest and walking away. Sakura's eyes widened as she turned her head. "Does that—" The pink-haired girl glanced around but he was already gone. 2 weeks later, Itachi had shown up again a few days later but only to watch her practice. He just sat on the crescent-shaped piece of land in meditation, seemingly ignoring her, but when she was giving out too much chakra into a part of her body or not enough, he informed her without even opening up his eyes. Twice she lost control and fell in, having to start her 100 count all over. The next time he showed up, Sakura had set a cup of hot white chocolate on the ground near her clothes. She had brought it every day, just in case, and drank it herself on the days he didn't show up. Although she never saw him drink it, when she went to put on her outfit after training, the cup was empty. 1 month later, March. Itachi hadn't shown up all the time, but she had seen him at least once a week. Sometimes she was lucky enough to see him 3 times. She reverted once again to her anti-social ways and avoided friends and dinners because she didn't want to miss Itachi if he did show up. She wasn't developing a crush on him, per se. Sure, she had a silly crush on Sasuke, but it was different with Itachi. It wasn't a roller coaster of emotions with him, it was more like an intense feeling of admiration. Her inner self didn't fail to remind her that if she passed the Chunin exams this year, she'd be legal. Ninjas who passed the Chunin exams were considered adults by law and action. But that was the perverted side of her mind talking, a side that was of little help. She was currently on number 18 of her floating practice, and due to it having to be consecutive, she was learning how much chakra she had and how to divide it. She had almost gotten to number 55, but that final push of chakra just wasn't enough. Tsunade was resigned to Hokage duty lately due to 5 trade treaties in desperate need of an update in Chunin preparations. Things were especially busy since the Chunin exam was being pushed back 3 weeks due to last-minute applicants from newly established villages. Fortunately, Shizune had still gone out of her way to make sure Sakura was practicing her medical jutsu and had completed the young pink-haired girl at her improvement in chakra control. Sakura had wanted to inform Shizune about her water affiliation discovery, but the words just wouldn't come out. Team 7 had just gotten a C-rank assignment and Sakura was packing up all she needed the night before. A large part of her wanted to go practice in the training ground because she knew that Itachi was in Konoha. She had seen him walking out from the Hokage tower when she was going to work. She bit her lip in contemplation as she finished packing her medical supplies. She wanted to go but she couldn't risk spending too much chakra right before a mission. Well, Itachi watched her practice, maybe she could watch him? She shook her head from side to side, hoping she could discard that idea. Going to watch an Anbu train? What does he need an audience for? Sakura raised her palm to her forehead. She was being ridiculous and stupid. It was the exact same attitude that caused Sasuke to continuously call her annoying even when she stopped her pinning. She grabbed her pajamas and forced them on. She was going to go to sleep, wake up in 8 hours, and meet up with her team in 9. She laid her weapon and medical pouch aside for the next day and turned off the lights. 20 minutes later the lights were back on and she was in the kitchen. She had made 2 cups of hot white chocolate and decided to leave, remaining in her sleeping attire to reassure herself that she wasn't going to train, just watch. She had on her red and white swirling PJ pants and white tank top as she entered the training grounds, feeling slightly ridiculous. Signing ineligibly, she didn't see Itachi's signature anywhere on the paper. He would probably come later, after all, it wasn't even midnight yet. She walked into the 13th room. It was empty and silent and gave her an eerie feeling in the pit of her stomach. Carefully, she situated herself by the door, where the weapons and explosions never attacked, and sat down. She took a sip out of her cup and then spent her free time trying to meditate. Meditation soon turned into a light sleep since she could never actually do it right. Itachi, come on, don't be an ass, she heard someone say as she slowly broke out of her daze of sleep. Oh, who's this? Hey Pinky. Sakura opened one eye and saw Shisui Uchiha squatting in front of her with Itachi Uchiha behind him. Her embarrassment reached a new level as her cheeks blushed a never-before-seen red. What are you doing here? Shisui asked curiously with a cheeky smile across his face. She glanced at Itachi. I wanted to watch, if it's... It's fine, Itachi said. Shisui, try not to throw something at her. Police, my aim is excellent, Shisui replied standing up. Itachi tossed a kunai gently towards Sakura. She caught it clumsily. Protect yourself if anything comes flying at you, he said coolly as he walked towards the middle of the room. He probably noticed her lack of proper attire. She silently wished she didn't pick her candy cane PJ bottoms. You're in for a show, princess, Shisui said, giving Sakura a wink. She smiled as she tried to rub the sleep out of her eye while they both prepared. Her expectation of the battle was completely blown away when Itachi connected 4 chakra webs and Shisui did the same. Then Itachi brought out a ninja sword and tried to slice his cousin's head off. He barely dodged and brought out his own sword and aimed it at Itachi's knees when he bent down to evade. Itachi flipped backwards, in time to avoid 3 kunais being thrown by the room and Shisui's attack at the same time. A bomb exploded by Shisui, and while flipping out the way, the elder Uchiha tossed a handful of shurikens at Itachi, who blocked those with his sword, did a flip and in an amazing act of acrobatics caught a kunai being thrown at him by the room and tossed it straight at Shisui's head. Another explosion came, blurring the battlefield slightly. She heard sword clanging and then saw Shisui jump onto a tree branch, which immediately attacked by dozens of shurikens. When he flipped out the way, he landed right into Itachi's territory and ended up getting sliced in the abdomen by his cousin. He reacted in time to lessen the blow. Then Shisui did something she had never seen before. Flicking his wrist combined with a twitch of his index finger caused him to disappear into thin air. Sakura then saw Itachi's eyes glow a shade of dangerous red that still brought her shivers of fear. The younger Uchiha then moved suddenly to the left, in time to blow Shisui's surprise attack. Shisui's eyes were red now too. Both ninjas had to move away as 5 kunais and a set of ninja stars came at them from every direction, only to reunite with another sword battle once the imminent danger of the room disappeared. Another explosion occurred near Shisui, and with another flicker of his wrist he disappeared. Sakura watched with a gaping open mouth. There were moments that they were just black blurs with 2 red dots. Her eyes could not keep track of all their movements, and if a kunai came at her head she wouldn't have been able to respond. She was too memorized by their battle. Their display of skill was so intense and amazing that she had no time to feel belittled. She was too busy appreciating them. Almost an hour later, 8 chakra webs disappeared and Sakura stood up, ignoring the 2 cups of chocolate, and tentatively walked towards them. Shisui was leaning against the tree breathing hard while Itachi, not breathing as heavily but still glistening with sweat, stood across from him. Both their swords were bloody. That was absolutely amazing. I've never seen something like that. You two are incredible, Sakura said in one swift breath. Ah, princess. Why thank you, I'm eternally thrilled at your appreciation of my skill, Shisui said with a devilish smirk. Can you heal him? The idiot dislocated his shoulder. It sounded more like a demand than a request, but Sakura quickly and happily obliged. Itachi's kunai was hooked in her finger as she approached the man who seemed to be able to teleport without the usual ninja smoke. You're a medic? Shisui asked as he went on his knees to be at Sakura's level so she could take a look at his injury. Yes, I'm not that good yet, but I'm working on it, she said. Well, get to Anbu and we'll steal you on our team, God knows we need a medic. Shisui muttered the last part under his breath as Sakura's hands began to glow green and her warm gentle chakra began to seep into his shoulder. Shisui would never, ever know how much his comment meant to her. Years later she would repeat it in her head over and over again. She felt that Team 7 would rather replace her 90% of the time. And here was an Anbu saying that he'd take her on his team. Even if it was in jest, it was the nicest thing that was ever said to her in a very long time. There, I can heal your arm too if you don't mind, Sakura half-asked half-said, hesitantly. Like I'm going to deny a pretty lady, Shisui said, sticking his forearm out at her. She placed her hands over it and began to heal the sword wound. So, what was your favorite part? Shisui asked as he watched the wounded area glow green between the gaps of her fingers. He knew from experience that she was doing it right, if not a bit slower than some well-trained medics. She was doing it correctly, and that's what counted, because God knows he just planned to bandage the wound up and keep his fingers crossed it wouldn't get infected. He admired her work as he watched the wound close up. Considering her age, she'd probably be one of the best medics when she got older. The way you disappeared was awesome, and when Itachi made those black flames appear was... Wow, I've never seen anything like that. Lucky he didn't use Amaterasu, Shisui laughed. Those black flames would have melted both me and you. And if we were lucky, Itachi too. But then the afterlife with him would be a pain. Sakura could feel Itachi giving his cousin an evil glare. Done, she said with a smile. Thank you, cutie, Shisui smiled. You don't know my name, do you? Sakura asked, noticing that he only called her by pet names. She pressed her hand on his abdomen without permission to heal the last big injury he received. All the rest were scrapes and scratches in comparison. Of course, I do. Shisui defended, his eyes darting to Itachi pleadingly, but his cousin remained silent. It's Rose, right? Sakura laughed. Sakura, she answered, not taking offense as she finished closing up the simple sword wound. I was close, he winked. I like Pinky and Princess more, they suit you better. Sakura's cheeks glowed in embarrassment as she looked away from him, meeting eyes with the other Uchiha. Can I heal your wounds, too? Please? Itachi stuck his palm out. It was the only major injury he received. He had to take a kunai through the palm, or through the face. He chose to sacrifice his palm. Shisui's eyes widened in shock. Unless Itachi was dying, not the sissy dying of a sword through the chest, but literally dying, cough up blood, chakra depleted, poisoned, unconscious, with 90 swords through his entire body. He wouldn't even let a medic come near him. And here he was allowing a little girl heal his palm. Shisui smirked widely as he cocked his head. Itachi shot him another death glare. The older cousin knew he'd pay later during their group training, but he didn't care. This was the best piece of blackmail, since, well, it was the only piece of blackmail he'd ever had on Itachi. Sakura muttered as her brows knotted and she concentrated harder. Itachi looked down and watched her work. She wasn't reconnecting muscles and skin, but was forced to use her newly learned medical jutsu of creating and mutating new muscle and skin, and by the look of how much chakra she was expelling, she was trying her very best. A medic like Shizune would have easily been able to do it for him without wasting half as much chakra as the pink-haired girl was, but then again, he wouldn't have gone to Shizune for a wound like this, or anything. With that vein, nerve to nerve, she continued to mutter under her breath, unaware of both Uchiha's excellent hearing. So, Sakura, you want to be a field medic or a hospital medic? Shisui asked when he noticed she got through the hardest part. I don't know yet, she replied as she bit her lip as she forced more chakra to help create a new artificial layer of skin over the wound. She needed 3 layers of artificial skin so that the body's immune system could accept it as its own. She's going to be a field medic, Itachi replied as if it was as obvious as the sky being blue. In his mind, someone dedicated enough to train alone to work on their weaknesses would be a waste as hospital medic. Really? Shisui asked, sarcasm and mischief dripping from his voice. Sakura finished and examined her handiwork, wishing she could have taken a before and after picture. It was probably the best she'd done, barely a scar visible. She's affiliated with the water element, Itachi continued, taking back his hand, opening and closing it. It was slightly sore but all the nerves were connected and working. Really? Princess, want to learn an awesome water jutsu? Shisui, Itachi's voice sounded like a guillotine slicing the head off someone. Well, excuse me, Shisui replied with a playful smirk as he looked back down at Sakura. What rank are you? The Chunin test is in about 3.5 months, so hopefully I'll pass it, Sakura said with an uneasy smile. Oh, you'll pass it. I know this water technique I copied from this Lake Valley ninja, it will make everyone cream their pants. She's not ready for something complicated. Says you, come on princess, what do you say? Don't you want to learn how to make a water dragon? Sakura couldn't handle the emotion flowing through her. She had spent the better part of almost 2 years feeling like she was without a real teacher and without a real team, and here she was being asked if she wanted to learn something from them. She couldn't help it, she broke down into tears all the while trying to suppress a happy laugh. Life was so stupid sometimes. Shisui looked at Itachi, who looked at Shisui, both men, utterly confused. Hey, princess, I didn't mean to, what is it that I shouldn't have meant to? Shisui asked, bending over and placed a hand on Sakura's back to comfort her. No, she giggled softly at the irony. No, it's just, she covered her eyes. I'm really happy. Oh, the world stopped making sense to Shisui. You should head home, my brother told me your team has a mission in the morning, Itachi said, trying to end this uncomfortable emotional display. Who the hell giggles and sobs at the same time? Okay, she nodded, trying to dry her eyes, but the tears kept flowing. Thank you for letting me watch, she said, bowing at both of them with a trailing hiccup. I hope you have a good night. What the hell are you talking about? Thanks for watching and healing us, Shisui said. No bowing and no good night yet, we're walking you home, right cuz? That would involve moving. He glared at both of them. They got the hint and began to walk out of the room with Itachi trailing behind. Sakura stopped by the door and picked up the 2 mugs of white liquid. Is that for us? Shisui asked teasingly. It's hot, well cold now, white chocolate. I get the beans from a sugarcane village, and it's pretty good. She handed him a cup, unsure if it was the one she had sipped from. Would you like to try? Sure. Shisui smiled and accepted, drinking it all down in almost a single gulp, delicious, and so sweet. Itachi-san, would you like some too? She offered the second cup to him. The asshole doesn't. Shisui was about to tell Sakura about Itachi's intense dislike of all things sweet but was stopped when he accepted. Doesn't? Sakura asked, looking back at the older Uchiha confused as they walked out of the training grounds. He placed his hand on her head and ruffled her hair. The world is a very confusing place sometimes. When they walked on out on the street, Itachi was on her right and Shisui was on her left. She felt nervous and awkward but also incredibly safe. Every single night guard took notice and no one knew what to make of it. Sakura arrived at the meeting spot at sunrise as happier than she had been in what felt like years. Nothing could ruin her mood. Itachi and Shisui had made her feel so confident that it was okay for her to be who she was at the moment. Good morning, Naruto, Sakura smiled at the blonde. Sasuke, she greeted the Uchiha. Sakura, mornin'. Naruto smiled. You look really good, I mean happy? I am, she replied with a smile. That's awesome. Naruto was genuinely happy for her. Learn any cool techniques from Tsunade? Not this week, she's been busy with Hokage stuff. I have 2 other teachers though, so it's okay, Sakura said, her cheeks turning a light shade of pink. She knew she shouldn't refer to Shisui and Itachi as her teachers, but hopeful thinking got the best of her in the moment. Her rational side reminded her that she was stretching the truth. But to think of 2 of the top Anbu shinobi in Konoha as her teachers just made her feel like she was special. And she desperately wanted to feel special, too? Sasuke asked, attempting to hide his curiosity in a disinterested tone. Who? Naruto asked. Secret, she answered with a wink. Why? Naruto complained and Sakura didn't miss the slight raise of Sasuke's eyebrow. Because, I don't want either of you two to steal them away from me, she replied, half sarcastically. We wouldn't do that, Naruto said, not aware how Sakura had felt due to Kakashi and Jiraiya's absolute concentration on their pupils. I know, Sakura said softly, unable to be angry at her dense but innocent teammate. Sue, you ready to leave? Kakashi asked, appearing out of nowhere. You're late. They all yelled and Kakashi said he was doing laundry and then found a stray dog that needed a bath and he never finished the rest. After their ritual greetings, they headed out the main gate. Their walk became just like every other walk. Naruto and Sasuke were arguing in front. Sakura trailed slightly behind them, and Kakashi was in the back end with his book open to one of the naughtiest pages in literary history. How that man could read smut without being fazed was truly a miracle. Instead of trying to break up the fight between her two teammates, or yell at Kakashi over his literature, she got out the kunai she never gave back to Itachi and began to rotate in her finger before she took out some newly made index cards. It was the next 2 sets of poisons and herbs Tsunade wanted her to learn, along with medical procedures and random facts about chakra control and water techniques that she mixed in at the last moment. After 2 miles of ignoring them, Naruto had fallen back in step with Sakura. What are you doing? He asked curiously. Sasuke slowed down to walk on the other side of Sakura. Studying, she said as she stopped rotating the kunai and flipped to the next index card. Whoa, what is blood rejuvenation? Naruto asked, reading the front of the card. It's a surgical procedure conducted after an extremely severe poisoning that's caught too late. You first remove the poison through water purification, but when the poison's already in the bloodstream you have to purify the blood with chakra nets and webs. Can you do that? Naruto asked. Probably. I've never worked with any serious poisons yet, but Tsunade first wants me to learn everything there is to know about them and where they come from and their treatments before she has me practice on people. Maybe Teme can be a practice dummy. Dope, more people would want you poisoned. More people would want you poisoned. Sakura decreased her pace, allowing them to continue their fight without her being in the middle. She returned to twirling Itachi's kunai around her finger as she flipped to the next card. After 3 days of traveling, they finally found a lake to rest peacefully by. Sakura had already memorized all the poison cards and was planning to burn through the rest, but Kakashi said that they should be on their guard due to the enemy territory, so she put them away. Ironically enough, he kept his book out the entire time. She was the first to bathe while the men prepared dinner. It was a relief to get to swim in the lake. It had been unconventionally hot and everyone was still dressed in their wintertime clothes. Plus, since they were taking the civilian path, there was absolutely no shade from the blistering sun. She believed that in another day she'd start smelling like Naruto after training. Sakura cringed at the thought as she dove under the chilling water. After cleaning herself up substantially, she practiced her water floating and sinking technique. She was on number 20 now. After 9 more successful attempts, she contemplated doing another 5. The pink-haired girl had the chakra for it, and she had the guard duty the night before with Naruto, so today it was Kakashi and Sasuke. She could risk it. Although, she thought that Kakashi might notice her sudden chakra loss, and she certainly didn't want to draw attention to herself. And she wanted to have enough chakra just in case of an ambush. Silently the Kunoichi wished she had unlimited chakra reserves. It would make things so much easier. She completed the water sinking 2 more times, perfectly. 69 more to go. She used up just enough chakra not to be noticed by Kakashi, or so she thought, and enough to be able to hold her own in the fight. Of course she was basing that on the premises of actually being allowed to fight. She sighed as she got out of the water and redressed herself. Walking back towards their campsite, dinner was already cooling off and Naruto and Sasuke had started without her. She didn't blame them, they didn't get a chance to eat all day. She sat near Kakashi as both boys stood up to take their turn to get cleaned up. Naruto scarfed down the last of his rice before trying to catch up with the Uchiha. Kakashi handed her the rice with dried eel pieces. She thanked him as she began to eat. So how's practice been? Kakashi asked, flipping the page of his book. Fine, she answered between bites. Ready for the Chunin exams? Hopefully, she replied. Good to hear, Kakashi said. Just so you know, you're terrible at small talk, you don't have to force yourself. I don't mind the silence, she said. Kakashi peeled his eyes off the page of the book to look at Sakura. Was this the same girl that he had trained with for the past 2 years? He wondered if she was a clone momentarily, but threw away the idea. She was quiet, calm, and Kakashi finally realized it. She was disinterested in the team. She didn't try to break up the fighting between Sasuke and Naruto, didn't argue with his lame excuses or terrible advice he gave during breaks. She was just there, but not there. Is everything okay, Sakura? Huh? She looked up at him, meeting his single lazy silver eye, of course. Sensei, are you okay? Hemp, was her sensei's reply as he returned to his smut. He wasn't prepared to believe the worst, that he failed to keep Sakura as a teammate, so he discarded the entire situation as a side effect of PMS. Ignoring the fact that he didn't smell menstrual blood on her, minor detail. Sakura shrugged it off. She never noticed that her personality had gone from extrovert to introvert since she began her nightly escapades. Practicing alone made her more of a quiet thinker, and when she was around other people she would subconsciously think about training. It was becoming an obsession that was taking over. After she finished her meal and when the boys returned, she went to wash everyone's dishes. Her mind traveled back to Itachi and Shisui. She couldn't wait to get back home. The pinklet wanted to fight Itachi the way Shisui did, so skillfully, so beautifully, so equally. Suddenly a dish fell from her hand into the water because of her lack of concentration. She reached to grab it from sinking but missed. Unconsciously her chakra flowed through the water and pushed the bowl, causing it to slowly floated back up to the top. Huh, Sakura said with an open mouth. She dropped the dish again and placed her fingers tips on top of the water, sending her chakra after the bowl, then slowly lifted the dish up without touching it. Interesting, she whispered to herself. She opened her palm on the water and spread her fingers out. She concentrated her chakra on her hands and then slowly spread it over the surface of the water. With her other hand she grabbed the bowl and placed it on top of the surface just a bit away from her fingers. The bowl floated evenly over the water as if it was on a solid surface. She released her chakra and the dish sank down. She placed her hand back into the water and forced it to float back up. She paid careful attention to how much chakra she wasted. More concentration was required on keeping the chakra over the water and keep the bowl from sinking, while more chakra was required to help the bowl float back up after it sunk. Sakura? She heard Naruto call for her. Almost done, she yelled back as she paused her miniature discovered to actually finish cleaning the travel dishes. New month. March. The next day they arrived at their destination, a small village that they were sent to give a scroll to. Once the transaction was done, Kakashi refused to stay when offered a room at a nearby inn, and everyone headed back with only a handful of complaints. Naruto, of course, being the most vocal of the group. C-rank missions were never much fun. They were like a poorly paid vacation, and a tiresome one at that. Sakura was already frustrated with traveling. The scenery had gotten so repetitive and boring she was practicing math problems in her head. If she wanted to be as mentally intelligent as Sasuke, she had to know what 421 divided by 4.2 is. She was still trying to figure it out after randomly picking the numbers. Boring, Naruto whined as the sun was finally preparing to set. At least it meant they could rest their wearisome legs. Boring is good, Kakashi said behind his book. The next day brought the excitement they were all internally wishing for. They were ambushed by half a dozen ninjas. The enemies were all dressed in black pants and tan tank tops, obviously a group of organized rogue ninjas, probably predominantly working on bounty hunting for loot and wanted suspects. None of them had their original village symbols displayed anywhere, but it was obvious that they were out to kidnap some Konoha brats to sell in the underground market. At least that was their plan before they realized just who the brat's teacher was. Kakashi had occupied the attention of 3 of them easily, and seeing their mediocre skill, allowed his students to take the rest. Naruto had 1, and Sasuke tried to take on 2. Of course, leaving Sakura alone, to do nothing. She glared. This was why she wanted to be a Konoha medic, not a field medic, because working with her team was just like not existing. But then, Sasuke had left an opening and gotten stabbed at the side. In reaction, Itachi's kunai left her finger and went straight into the enemy's thick neck, but due to his build, it didn't go deep enough to pierce any major artery. He was the largest and most intimidating looking of the enemies, and also the one with the biggest weapon, a large thick blade with a triangular tip. It was a weapon from the land of the west and it looked almost 3 feet long from where she stood. Sakura, Sasuke screamed, knowing she had interfered. Wishing she would have stayed hidden, he could handle it. There was a reason Kakashi taught them to hide their chakra, damn it. The man looked at the girl with the expression of someone seeing something they want for the first time. Come here, cutie. A smirk spread across his unshaven face as he rushed towards her. Sasuke tried to stop the man from going after his teammate, but then the smaller black-haired ninja he had also been fighting tried to slice his head off, and the Uchiha barely ducked from the katana sword and was forced to return to the other fight. Naruto was also unable to safely detach himself from his battles to assist Sakura and Kakashi. Who knows why Kakashi didn't stop the ninja? Sakura would overanalyze that later. She ran into the forest depths, landing on every branch harder than the last, making sure the other man followed her. A possible plan formulated in the back of her mind. The lake was nearby, if only she could stay away from him for that long. Sadly, he was faster. The sword came to her head, and she stopped and ducked while sticking her leg out at the same time, putting chakra into her kick, causing him to flip over backwards from the force. She wasn't good enough to cause any real damage, but she was able to imitate the basic muscle strength with her chakra-induced strength. Tsunade said she still had a long way to go, but the midst of battle was not the right time to dwell on it. She quickly jumped into another tree branch, but he was already near her, ready to strike her down. She narrowly avoided his attack and due to her pettiness was able to jump above him and use his shoulder as a propellant to get out of the way. He grabbed the kunai lodged in his neck and threw it at her. She dodged and it landed in a tree. She spun around, grabbing it from the tree in the process. She couldn't just leave Itachi's kunai, and rushed onto another branch, missing another slice from his large sword, and continued evading him as she inched nearer and nearer. Come here, you little bitch. He snarled in a deep masculine voice. She could no longer tell his features. Her heart was racing so quickly and her adrenaline was pumping continuously without much of a pause, that she had only had selective vision. He had to be at least twice her age, but she mentally slapped herself and tried to place all useless thoughts aside as she continued to do her best to dodge his attacks. One time she ducked too late, and an inch of a chunk of her hair got sliced off in the process. She ignored her inner self's curses as a strike came to the branch she was on and she had dropped down a few meters onto another branch unexpectedly. The kunoichi had fallen incorrectly and her knee joint gave a snap. When I get you, he threatened, jumping towards her, but she leapt out of the way and tried to escape and gain distance between them. The angrier he got, the faster he seemed. She landed on her good leg and attempted to try to heal her other twisted knee as much as needed for it to be useful. He came at her again and she was forced to leap out of the way once more. This time she miscalculated the distance and hit the tree trunk, causing splinters to form down her arm before she pushed herself onto another branch. A dozen mental curses ran through her head and she suddenly felt so hopeless that she wanted to cry in the middle of battle. But the man was not done with her yet and Sakura forced herself to jump again. When she landed, in her peripheral vision, the lake was in view. She thanked the heavens. She stopped, not wanting him to know her plan, as she visibly took out 4 shurikens and tossed them at him as hard and fast as she could. He blocked them with his sword and with speeds she could barely comprehend attacked her midriff. She jumped up onto another tree branch with only a half-second to spare. He came at her again. She ducked and kicked him in the face, but her chakra-enhanced strength wasn't enough to do any damage. She could feel her body trembling from fear and lack of experience, but she had to continue to evade him to survive. He sliced again, missing her, and instead cut the tree in half. The top part toppled over. That could have been her, sliced in half and falling to the ground. She gulped as her forehead perspired enough to get sweat into her eyes. You slut! He screamed in anger as he went to slice at her again. Sakura jumped onto another tree branch and he went to stab her. She thought he was going to pull his sword back, but instead he used the motions to do a diagonal slice across, getting a good deep cut into her thigh. Ha 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 ha, like that, you little whore? She pressed her hand on the thigh, enough medical chakra to stop the clotting but not enough to heal it. She couldn't waste any unnecessary chakra. She faked an excessive amount of fear as he approached her. The type of fear people did when they were about to give up. Yes, she was scared, but she was a ninja, she couldn't give up yet. How was she going to face Itachi dead? Shisui said he could teach her something cool. She had something to live for. Oh, that's nice. That's the face you should be making. Come here, I'll be gentle, I'm a good man. He went to grab her and she slid between his legs and placed more chakra in her foot than she ever had in that split second and kicked backwards. He fell forwards, going straight towards the lake. He yelled as his sword escaped his grasp. After she heard the huge splash, followed by a second smaller one, she jumped on top of the lake, chakra balancing her and squatted down, placing her palms on top of the water, spreading her chakra all around. Yes, in a one-on-one, he would win. He was faster and stronger and more experienced. But Sakura was smarter. And more importantly, she wasn't just some medic, she was going to be an Enbu medic one day. Her inner self cheered her on. She spread her chakra all over the top layer of the lake, her concentration at its maximum as she couldn't leave a single gap else it would be imperfect. Her heart was thumping in her throat and her brain felt like it was pulsating. Everything felt strained and even the air seemed thicker. Her body had never before been so rigid. She saw the man swimming up, but the wall of chakra over the water stopped him from getting the oxygen he needed. He slammed into her chakra barrier, but Sakura didn't waver. More chakra, more concentration. She was going to be like Itachi and Shisui one day. She'd fight how they fought. She couldn't let him out, they wouldn't let him out. Sakura didn't notice that she had been holding her breath while performing the chakra barrier and her body began to shake as the man's punches and attacks to her chakra wall became more and more powerful in desperation. He swam a little away and tried to get above the water, but her barrier extended through the entire lake. By him being underwater, his strikes lost much of their momentum, making the attacking force bearable for Sakura. She was not going to give up. Sasuke and Naruto weren't going to save her. She didn't need saving. She could do this. Come on. Then, for the first time, she saw his life left a man's eyes because of her. The last bubbles of air escaped his mouth only to be blocked off by her barrier. She watched as a body gave up fighting for existence. She watched as the entire body of the Rouge Ninja went into the hypoxic convulsion stage of drowning and slowly sunk into the depths. It was the first time she was responsible for another's death. Sakura gasped for air and began hyperventilating. The barrier disappeared. She was barely keeping enough chakra around her knees and palms to keep herself afloat. That was one of the most straining techniques she had ever performed in her life. Her heart raced at a pace that should have placed her into cardiac arrest and she was trembling all over in an almost seizure fashion. Then she vomited that morning's breakfast and it felt like her entire stomach had come out as well. She tried to exhale calmly, but that only caused another vomiting fit in which blood was the main liquid being excreted. Her left palm chakra gave out and she almost fell into the water, catching herself at the last second. Breathe, breathe, relax, calm down. Her inner self screamed, but it took a few minutes for her body to listen enough so that her ears could hear something other than her pounding heart. Slowly she stood up but paused as vertigo took hold of her. The entire forest area was spinning. The kunoichi closed her eyes tightly, feeling her gag reflex taking over again. Soon, she felt like it was okay to move again. She opened one eye, looked down at the depths of the lake. She stood up, opening her other eye. Her breathing was still uncontrollable. "Sorry, it was you or me," she said between gasps, her knees shaking enough to cause her to fall forward on all fours. Thankful that she was able to distribute her chakra in time, and it can't be me, yet. With a few more stumbles she crawled across the lake and onto land. She looked at her thigh, decided against healing it. Her teammates might need her medical assistance more than she did. After almost 5 minutes of trying to regain her normal rhythm of breathing, realizing that the air around her was in abundance and that she wasn't going to run out, she stood up, and walked a few meters in perfectly calm control. Then with a soft exhale, happy over the regained domination of her body movements, she jumped onto a tree branch and paused. She was scared of fainting, but when her body and mind didn't show any signs of failing, she jumped from branch to branch, carefully and without straining her legs too much as she made her way towards her team. Then she paused, she was becoming dizzy again. "Damn it," she whispered as she leaned against a tree trunk, waiting for her weakness to pass. Shortly she heard Naruto's frantic screams, "Sakura! Sakura? Baka!" Sakura muttered under her breath. "Here!" she screamed, and in less than 5 seconds, 3 men appeared in front of her. She had stood as straight as possible, and offered a half smile. At least everything had stopped spinning again. Naruto only had a sliced cheek and a stomach wound which was already in the process of healing itself. Sasuke had only the side stab that she had seen him get earlier, and Kakashi seemed perfectly okay. "Come here, let me heal you," Sakura said, taking the small leap onto the branch where Naruto was. "Are you okay?" "Yes, now stop moving," she instructed Naruto as she placed her glowing and slightly shaky hand on his cheek. His abdomen was already closing up thanks to his amazing regenerative ability. "Your thigh?" Sasuke asked. "I stopped the bleeding. I'll heal it after I'm done with you too." "The rogue ninja?" Kakashi asked in a tone that barely seemed to care. "In the bottom of the lake," Sakura replied, giving Naruto a somewhat proud smile after she finished. "It's a good thing he wasn't too skilled," Sasuke said offhandedly. Sakura's eyebrow twitched. She wanted to slap him so hard. "Not too skilled?" He got a stab in on Sasuke. She approached the Uchiha, went on her knee and ignored his eyes as she placed her palm on his side and made quick work of the injury. Not her best work, and an inner part of her wanted it to get infected, but she got the job done. "Well, at least everyone's okay," Kakashi said, reaching into his pocket for his book. Sakura remained on her knee as she pressed her palm against her wounded thigh and healed it a little more. She didn't care if it scared. She didn't have much chakra left after the lake barrier, and Naruto and Sasuke's injuries had taken priority. "So, how'd you beat your guy, Sakura?" Naruto asked curiously when Sakura stood up. "Oh, Sasuke interjected, interrupting Sakura. "She probably led him to the lake and he couldn't swim." Naruto laughed. Probably all that muscle weighed him down. Before Sakura could burst out in suppressed tears or think of a proper way to handle the situation, Itachi's kunai was stabbed right through her thigh, exactly where she healed her previous injury. All eyes were on her. The physical pain eased the tsunami of emotions inside of her and kept her from breaking down. "Saw Sakura?" Naruto was the first to question as she removed the kunai, letting blood drip down. She didn't have the patience or chakra to heal it. "It was either me or you two," she replied, simply standing up. A shiver ran down her spine. "Let's go." 3 uncontrollable tears had already escaped her eyes, but no man noticed. Most importantly, she kept herself from sobbing in front of them. An eerie silence followed the trip back. THSTA all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.